This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is June 4th, 2026.
I'm Scott Lindebaum.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. On today's show, the Conservatives have a new leader, and neither of us would have picked her as who we think would have won or who we would want to win.
Yeah, neither did the patron poll in our Slack end up down this. I think we had, one of the patrons accurately guess this one?
Yes, good job, Dean. I think Polymarket got it, or one of those online betting things, which tells you a lot about the state of politics in 2026. We also get into how much FIFA is going to cost, and Carney has been making lots of decisions or kicking lots of cans this week. And we'll get into that on AI, taxing Netflix, and changing environmental assessment laws. But get access to that Slack channel and vote on future random emoji polls at patreon.com/politicos. Let's start with the BC Conservative Party. The big news this past weekend was that on the fourth round ballot, Kerry-Lynne Findlay took the party with a resounding 51% of the vote. This is a wildly tight race, hey?
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the, 2016, 2017 Conservative Party federal leadership race where Andrew Scheer just eked out I think it was 13th ballot win, just ever so slightly ahead of Maxime Bernier on that. And this one, very reminiscent of that. Went to the final round and was a real squeaker with the 51-49 split.
Yeah, Findlay led on every round, but the first round was wildly tight. She only had 30% of the points after the first round. Elliott had 25, 26%. Ian Black had 20%, which was pretty strong for him. Fulmer at 13%, and Peter Millibar way back at 10%. His brand of moderate progressive conservatism, or even just like
BC liberalism.
Well, like he was still trying to run a little bit more conservative, but the least of them it just didn't bite. No one bought it, or only 10% of the party was interested in that. So
yeah, I feel I might not have called the top line one, but I'm feeling somewhat good about it. The one we did, 2 weeks ago, where thought Millibar was going to be fighting for the last place spot. So at least it was on that one. But Findlay was a little bit of a surprise. I've heard of several commenters saying some version of any of these outcomes were likely. So like there isn't really a true surprise on this because it could have been any of the top three and it wouldn't have shocked pretty much anyone.
No.
That said, like Findlay was probably, if you were to, assign probabilities, probably wouldn't have taken the top slot. I think the general consensus was Elliott was the de facto front runner.
Yeah, and that's what I was reading into it. But as we look at the results, the oldest, most racist person winning does seem characteristic of who the Conservative Party stereotypically has been historically for quite a while, or the oldest, craziest one winning does fit. She does have a element of being the proper heir to the John Rustad party, where he was old in spirit and actually quite a bit younger than you would think.
She's early 60s, wasn't he?
He was mid 50s when we first started covering him, I swear. He is 62 right now. So
she's got a good 10 plus years on him, right?
Oh, at least. Yeah.
Because she's what, 72?
I don't...
We should have looked this up before we started recording.
71 according to Google. So, one could be retired at 65 and just enjoying life, or one could, I guess, be president of the United States or leader of the opposition in BC. here
this
we
was
are.
going to be our last leadership race, one way or the other. Just not get too many chances after that. But I don't know. As much as I like doing the podcast, I'm not sure I want to be doing this at 71. Like, I kind of want to be enjoying retirement at that age.
I'm not going to endorse mandatory retirement ages, but
I mean, if she got appointed to the Senate, she'd be out of there in 4 years.
Yeah. So she comes in, she clearly caught some momentum. And I think one of the things that went against Elliot is she ended up being too establishment for the anti-establishment party, right? She had people were like, how did the person who had 2 premiers endorse her lose? And I'm like, because no one likes those premiers. No one likes any past premiers.
Those endorsements don't matter that much these days.
Well, and like her entire team was well established as, in party insiders. Her past involvement was in the BC Liberal Party in high profile positions. So,
they're not all party insiders. A bunch of them were hires out of Ontario and Eastern Canada too, which was definitely a point of contention during the race.
It at least like fit the mold of someone who.
I mean, when you have you have Dud Ford's campaign manager running your campaign, there's definitely an element of establishmentness to that.
Yeah. And the party just wants to be angry, and they found the angriest person to do it.
That's definitely where the energy is on the right these days, which, is unfortunate. Yeah, the kind of business-minded center-right person who would probably be a competent premier, just doesn't have the chance these days in pretty much any right-wing party to catch fire or even just get momentum going on that.
No, they need to run for the Liberal Party of Canada and then be like wildly popular for it. That's where they belong, apparently.
Which almost makes you wonder, is someone finally now going to bring back the BC Liberal Party, and is Kevin Falcon going to let them do that?
Well, that's kind of the obvious question of what happens next for the Findlay Conservative Party is, how does this coalition hold together? We can already tell she's not going to be getting Jordan Keeley into her caucus, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Dallas Brody seems at this point too toxic for anyone to touch. Tara Armstrong might be an option. I don't feel like Eleanor Sturko or Amelia Boultby are eager to come back to this version. Maybe Sturko would try, but
both seem unlikely.
Yeah, right. And on the other side, you got people like Peter Millibar and Aaliyah Warbus, who don't seem at home here, especially after Findlay accused Millibar of having conflicts of interest on issues like DRIPA because his wife is Indigenous.
Yeah, that was definitely a low moment in the campaign, for sure. But also, throughout the whole campaign, I mean, everyone was doing this to an extent of trying to be, more conservative than thou, but Findlay in particular, leaned hard into it and really came out swinging against some of the other camps on this, which, okay, you can make an argument that it's a leadership race. You always run to the left or right of the respective party to try and win that, and then, shift a little bit more back towards the center when it comes time to campaign for the general election. But I don't know, it had enough energy behind it and just who Findlay is doesn't strike me as someone that is going to be easy to make that pivot. I could have seen Elliot or Fulmer both pulling that one off better, because both of them had backgrounds in more traditional BC liberalish areas, and Findlay's just a conservative through and through, and certain kind too, which is just makes it, I think, unlikely that that's going to be the case, and that could certainly spell difficulty keeping the coalition together.
her tagline is faith, family, freedom, and they're already plastering that over the Conservative Party of BC's ads. And in a province where a majority of people are non-religious, and we're about to see Census 2026 probably push that number to maybe 60%, maybe just 55%. You're alienating people.
Yeah, it feels like missing the mark.
And when she says faith, we know which faith she's talking about. It's not all of them. And so in an increasingly diverse and secular province, being obsessed with Soji, being obsessed with COVID still, like, she's really yesterday's candidate. But no, it's something. I had the number of people who voted in the race previously. I don't have it in front of me now.
About 25,000 from what I remember reading, but I don't have the actual...
That sounds right to me. Which is not terrible. It's nowhere near what the either the NDP or UCP in Alberta get for membership voting. I think they have like 60 to 80,000 people vote because people actually engage in political parties in that province.
Yeah, the party culture around that's just a little different there. It's infinitely more than voted in the last BC NDP leadership race.
I think the NDP had about 10 to 12,000 at the start of that race, but yeah, they didn't end up having a race, so we'll never know how many voted there. You know, it's not a fringe party number of members, but it's also the people who were eager and attracted to this party who voted. So it's hardly a representative sample, and none of these people managed to, you know, attract the arguably majority of people who are unhappy with David Eby's leadership, depending on which poll you look at. But like, his numbers aren't strong. They could be worse.
It could definitely be worse. Just be a lot better too. And you get the sense the NDP is pretty happy with this result, but I wouldn't be popping the champagne so soon, because we've spent months now documenting all the challenges Eby's been facing, and beyond that, he barely eked out a win against BC's least charismatic person in John Rustad. I have a real open question whether you add another 4 years of tough decisions, waning popularity, the big issues of the province still being unresolved, whether that, even if there isn't like a giant scandal or something that really just pushes the numbers down to Justin Trudeau at the end level, whether or not that just is going to be real hard for the NDP to win. If for no other reason, then that would be quite a few elections in a row would be going for a win on. And that's just tough, even under the best of circumstances with a strong candidate, and Eby's neither.
This is a province that elected Bill Vander Zalm once.
Oh, BC politics used to be famously nutty and interesting compared to the rest of the country. It's got a little boring during the Horton years, but there's something in the bones of the province's political culture that can see some wild things happen. So you should never rule any of that out.
No. So yeah, I agree. I think of the options on the ballot, Findlay presents the easiest for the NDP to campaign against, but it's also kind of like the riskiest situation. If she wins, things go to uncharted territories for a while. But between like the likelihood of caucus, discord on her side and the NDP's ability to just fearmonger about the potential of her premiership, they probably feel better than if Caroline Elliott had won, who could probably present a newer face to the party, or any of the others. But yeah, Findlay's so fascinating, right? Because on the one hand, she did hold a cabinet ministry with Stephen Harper. In the other hand, she has lost a lot of elections over the years. Like, give her props, I guess, for keeping trying at it. she found something she loves and wants to keep doing it. She won this one, and she has clearly, won past elections, but next she has to actually find a seat. And maybe that involves asking her husband, the MLA for, I think it's Surrey South, Brent Chapman, if he wants to step down, or if she asks someone else to step down. It would be very weird to have a husband and wife in the same caucus meeting. I don't think there's any rules against it, but I would feel weird if I was in a caucus where a husband and wife were there and one of them was the boss.
Yeah, maybe. We'll have to see where she ends up going on that. The other thing I'll note is she ran up the points in the interior of the province in the north, but none of her top ridings were in the lower mainland, and that also does speak to something about the next election and her challenges there, because it doesn't matter if you can take one of those interior ridings from win by 10 points to a win by 20 points. You don't get another seat for that, so you have to actually win in the lower mainland, and it's, I think, going to be a challenging sell for that for her. There's definitely going to be a little bit of work need to be done to sand off some of the rough edges on that.
Or they just go full, I feel lazy to go full MAGA or whatever, but, full populist, whatever, shouting at everything, and things just keep being chaotic. Yeah, speaking of chaotic, today we got the extra bombshell drop that a second MLA has been charged with a violent crime, as Jordan Keeley has now been charged with sexual assault dating to instances from January to September 2024, i.e. just before he was elected.
Yeah, the prosecution service put out a statement today on this. I believe the investigation itself started on February 9th of this year, and they've, of course, appointed a special prosecutor on that. But yeah, so these weren't like pending charges when the election was held, but definitely concerning for sure. And I always hate talking about these stories because you only have the little bit on like the press release up front, and it's very hard to know just from the decision to charge anything more than that. So at this point, it's largely speculation on where this is going to go.
Yeah, Keeley has denied the charges, said he's innocent. So that's all we have from him. He, of course, left the Conservative Party in 2025 last year in solidarity with Dallas Brody.
But not so much solidarity as to join 1BC.
Yeah, that's because he just likes being so independent. I somehow missed this until I pulled up his Wikipedia today, but apparently in the past he has also posted in support of chemtrails, or at least the chemtrail conspiracy.
Yeah, probably anti-chemtrail, but...
he claims the government uses them to control the weather. When asked about that during the election, he said that's under federal jurisdiction because it's an aviation issue, so it wouldn't be something he would bring up in the legislature. But yeah, given, the Conservatives previously dropped a member from caucus who was facing domestic violence charges in this session, I don't think they'll be taking Keeley back until this is clear, although it wasn't clear.
The Han Chan stuff's still working its way through the system too.
And I don't know if Keeley would have wanted to go back, but I guess we'll keep an eye on where those charges go. And finally, in provincial news, the province has updated its cost projections for FIFA World Cup, and guess what? It won't cost $1 billion. It'll only cost 2/3.
Yeah, that's still only for 7 games, so that's $100 million per game. It's not great.
But we're going to make billions over the next 5 years in GDP. Somehow.
Okay, I can like at least get the projections for the event itself. Like you can make some reasonable assumptions about, okay, if there are this many tickets to the events, and we're gonna assume so many people are going to be traveling in for it versus the locals that are going to it. You can work out roughly how much hotels, restaurants, cab fares all add up to, and throw that into the economy on that, on the plus side of this. But 5 years from now,
listen,
is there any...
nobody knows that Vancouver exists, and we need the World Cup going all around North America to remind them of our one city. Not one city, but the city that is here and they could come to. The Olympics
wasn't that... it was a while, 16 years ago, but we've had international events here within most people's memories.
Yes. Speaking of hotels, there was also a story this week that reminded me that apparently FIFA organizers have canceled 15,000 nightly room bookings in Vancouver. And now the Hotel Association is panicking, and they're saying this event that was supposed to fill so many rooms has now gotten chaotic. But don't worry, prices on your hotel rooms will not be dropping. Also, ticket prices for World Cup games are very expensive, and if you try to resell them or even raffle them for charity, FIFA will come after you. I've seen all of those stories. I'm not seeing a lot of like, oh man, people love FIFA stories these days. I mean, there's the like, Science World has been painted up like a soccer ball and people trying to kind of capture the mood, but I don't know.
Oh, there's also the giant flagrant grouse that got hung backwards.
Oh, I missed that it was backwards.
Yeah, the stem's actually supposed to point the other way when hung vertically. So if it looks slightly wrong to you when you look up at it, that's the reason why.
The stem points one way?
Yeah, there's...
On the Canada flag?
Well, it points down normally, but if you have it arranged vertically, it's supposed to point in one specific direction.
Right, left or right, and not the other.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand now. The good news for the province in their projection is they think we will collect about 200 million in taxes, direct and indirectly throughout the events. So, we're only really sinking 400 million, 500 million into this event. A lot of that through security costs, policing costs. I remember covering one of the stories when Horgan was first elected, and he got the contract from FIFA, and he said, this is stupid, we're not doing this, and he canceled it, and people were so mad, and then they managed to actually leak it, and people were like, oh wait, you knew what you were talking about, you like sports, and you realize this is a bad sports deal. And then in theory it was improved, and here we are with Horgan's successor wearing the, all right, prove to us that $700 million is worth it for some soccer games. And listen, no judgment to the people who love World Cup. I know they're out there. But it does feel like a thing that North America doesn't deserve. Let us get better at the sport first.
I mean, there's that. Although North America also includes Mexico, so I feel like we can't be looking down our nose too much on that front. But also, I just don't like this format of we're going to spread it out over an entire continent.
It's very weird.
Yeah, like, it was weird when they did put it in, like, a couple different cities in Brazil, and some of the games were a few thousand miles from the main stadium. Some are up in, like, the main city they have in the Amazon. That was weird, but at least it was all in one country. This isn't even in one country. And I don't know, what was wrong with having one city where it was in a single stadium where, yeah, the fact that you have to have a whole bunch of extra, police on hand, and there'll be a much less seen, but nevertheless still in the general area, military presence, like what was done with the Olympics. At least if you're stretching that out, but it's over an entire tournament that runs the full time, it actually starts to make a little more sense on it versus a game here and there.
The World Cup is 104 games, which is a lot. But I don't know. Maybe like the finals, like from the the round of 16 onward, all gets held in one place, and you do the group stage broadly, and those are just a little less intense. Oh, the whole thing, it's, I don't know, the like cost of it, the cost of the hotels, the cost of the tickets, it's so dystopian against everything else that's happening, and the people who are struggling, the, you know, homeless situation we have, the continuing overdose crises, everything else, the cost of living for your average person. And then you're like, we're bringing the Hunger Games to town. Like, that's where I feel like I'm at, but maybe I'm just being cynical.
Yeah, I could have gotten excited for another Winter Olympics. This just isn't
because we
my
like
thing.
skiing. That's because we like skiing.
Well, and hockey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely prefer the Winter Olympics to the summer ones. But also, you know, the 2010 Olympics it was a pretty great time.
Hey, maybe we'll be proved wrong, and FIFA will go down as something great for the city, but still to be determined. There was a lot of cynicism right up until the Olympics kind of kicked off in Vancouver, I think, too. But anyway, it will cost a lot of money. We know that for sure. I mean, the highlight they're trying to show is it's going to cost slightly less than they predicted last year, but it's not really the positive news they want. It's kind of like the province released the rental report showing, you know, rents have gone down, and it's like, sure, but they're still too much money. It's still too expensive. It's just me being a cynic here. Speaking of being cynical, let's talk about Mark Carney's AI strategy, AI for all. Did anyone like this?
I had a pretty busy day at work, so I've not had a chance to closely filter through all the reactions on it, so I'm going to have to punt on that particular question, but the few comments I've seen have been mixed, I would say, but I haven't actually looked at anyone doing stuff in this field or in the various fields that have intersected with AI. I don't know, what did you see on it in terms of the reactions out there?
There's a lot of cynicism in the circles I look at around AI, a lot of skepticism, and I need to dig into one or two of the commentators who I know put more thought into this than just like see something AI and then yell about it.
Yeah,
I do know, like, Avi Lewis's response was, this is too thin on actually trying to protect Canadians from the like threats, whether things like people, you know, BBC here is talking about Tumbler Ridge and going, where is the actual like accountability that will stop that from happening beyond just like public apologies from Sam Altman?
I feel like I could have predicted that's what Avi Lewis would have said before the AI strategy came out.
Yeah, and that's part of the challenge, is a lot of people give their predictable responses.
Yeah, and particularly on AI, where you definitely have a booster camp out there, and you also have a extremely skeptical of AI camp as well. And there's it's not entirely sort of along politically ideological lines, but there's definitely a trend on that. Mm-hmm. And you made some guesses on where people are going to fall on that just based on knowing where their politics are. That said, the first part of the AI strategy is on AI safety, protecting Canadian safety and democracy. It is something they forefront pretty significantly on this, including that they're committing to modernizing privacy legislation, safeguarding children's information from exploitation and harm, strengthening people's control over their personal data, introducing new online safety laws. So it is something that this, at least in the strategy document, takes seriously.
Yeah, it's the first pillar. It's, I guess the balance is trusting that they're actually going to do that when a lot of the framing around the rest of the document is pretty heavy booster. The Prime Minister's own press release talking about how this is going to create $200 billion of economic growth and create, Scott, 250,000 AI-related jobs over 5 years. The big issue a lot of people keep raising with AI is job losses and job replacements. And here we are claiming a wild number of job creation with AI.
The thing that
as businesses go from 12% have used it to 60% is their goal.
The thing that gets me about the AI job loss concern is the people who are most down on AI for job losses also tend to be the people that are most down on AI as a hype technology that isn't actually going to deliver its promises. I kind of feel like there's a little bit of a underexplored tension in a lot of how those people talk about AI.
It's because a lot of people have shitty managers who they know don't give a fuck and will happily fire them for something that doesn't work.
Maybe. The thing I come back to on this is that throughout history, every time a productivity enhancing technology has come around, it has on net resulted in more jobs than it has destroyed. And what happens when you make an economy more productive is you then have more economic activity that generates new opportunities for jobs and creates different jobs that people end up in. I mean, at one point, 95% of people were doing agricultural work, and the fact that a whole lot of technological progress has gone into agriculture means that a lot of people are no longer subsistence farmers and get to do stuff like sit in a nice air-conditioned office and work on computers all day in a way that is significantly more productive. Like those technologies they may have reduced employment in agriculture, but they sure led to a whole lot better situation for most people on here. And it's far too early to predict how AI is going to pan out, but the broad sweep of history is that technological improvements don't lead to widespread job loss, especially on net. Buddy whip makers obviously went out of business, but a whole lot more people got employed working in their replacement industries and various spin-offs from that. So I'm not as worried about the technological unemployment, and to be worried about it, you kind of have to have an assumption that AI is a fundamentally different technology than all of the past productivity improving technologies that have come out, and that I don't think there's enough evidence to make a firm stand on.
I agree with you at the big picture scale, but in terms of like the lived experience of individuals through those transitions, I think the challenge for policymakers is how do we make it the least, like, not just disruptive, but like provide people the pathway through it. And I think some of this actually is in here when it's talking about skills training and creating those new jobs. I would like to actually just see, I actually am okay with fewer jobs because I like that, that John Milton Keynes idea that, hey, at the rate we're going in 100 years, as in today for us right now, you'll only have to work a few hours a week if everything keeps getting better. And then things didn't from that perspective in terms of like hours of work.
That's not entirely true. Hours of work has definitely improved. He got the sign right on it. He just got the quantity significantly wrong on it. But there has been improvements. People are working on average fewer hours than they did in Keynes's time.
There's still work to be done.
Yeah,
that's
it's
my
not
point.
as
It's
big
like
a
it would be
leap as-
great to.
Yeah, and so I think underestimated how much people would take those gains in terms of increased consumption that they would unlock versus maintaining consumption and reducing employment hours.
Marketing's a hell of a drug. But it's to, reduce employment in this era would require alternative mechanisms to support people, whether that's universal basic income or some way to just make life affordable on fewer hours of work. But this is a let's keep people employed just in new jobs kind of approach, and that's fine. It's at least trying to think of some of it. I'll be curious to watch over the coming weeks how the response rolls out to this, because this is fairly fresh across our desks. I think it came out today, right? So it
was this morning.
The smart people take their time to read things and don't just give hot takes on a podcast that evening, Scott. This is just what we do. Yeah,
unfortunately, speaking of work hours, the patron's not kicking it up quite enough for both of us to step back from our real jobs to dig into these full-time day of, and perhaps even more unfortunately, the federal government's not exactly releasing stuff in a schedule that is optimum for us to thoroughly review it before our scheduled podcast day.
Drop it on a Monday morning. That's all I ask.
That would be even a Wednesday. Just no news after noon on Wednesday, and you can start back up again on Sunday. That'd be ideal for this podcast.
The final bit I think that's worth pulling out of this is the focus. That's not a surprise. This is familiar to some of the consultations we've seen. And Carney's broad rhetoric overall is sovereignty, right? Is building up our computing infrastructure at scale to grow our own systems and networks. That'll be a challenge, for governments, as there's going to be, we're seeing pushback. There's the planned data center in Vancouver, and there's protests against that. And I think we're going to see more and more of that over the coming months and years as these kind of things get pitched and proposed.
Oh yeah, there's definitely an anti-data center moral panic going on, where the harms of those are blown well out of proportion to the actual impacts.
It's not hard to feel angry, though, when Vancouver is under stage 3 water restrictions right now and people are talking about data centers, and it's but I would like water to drink. I mean, you're still allowed to drink as much water as you want, but
it's a closed loop system they're proposing, so it uses less than an open loop cooling system, and even so, it's on par with a lot of light to medium industrial uses. The water gets a lot of attention, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to agriculture. It is on par with a lot of industrial processes. The way to, I think, best think about these is they're light industrial buildings that have the water footprint and energy footprint of an industrial building.
I did see someone post a meme today comparing the water usage of the dairy and cattle industries in the US versus, all the AI and tech combined. And it's, farming is water intensive as it gets.
Yeah, and the US is particularly bad about doing it in states that are not great for agriculture based on rainfall levels. The amount of water that gets used in California for almonds and alfalfa is legit insane.
So I think we'll have to come back to this strategy as it starts to roll out, and it'll also be another one of those things to watch over whether this strategy actually becomes anything. Do they start to bring in those changes to the privacy law and so forth that I hope they do? Or is this another white paper that sits on a shelf like many, many before it?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the thing. I mean, how many times have we talked about something the previous version of the Liberal government announced, and then we never actually saw it land with any impact when it came to execution because the government was legitimately terrible at turning announcements into real-world effects. So definitely something that remains to be seen. Federal government in particular has been pretty terrible at that for the last 8 to 10 years, give or take. So that'll be a change. There's a couple other thoughts on this. One of the things that was in this was to provide students in Canada with access to AI agents, which, like, on one hand, you can make an argument for the case of we're going to, help build fluency with the usages of that, but particularly the part about provide trusted AI agents for every post-secondary students from arts, commerce, science, technology, and engineering, STEM and medicine. Some of that I don't entirely love. Like, when I was going through engineering school, like, time and time again, the professors were made a point that you actually do need to learn this stuff by hand. And yes, even back then, we had pretty good computer programs that you could input everything and it would give you the solutions for what you were trying to design and model. But if you don't actually have the deep understanding that comes from going through all those theoretical courses, working through the problems on it, and then getting the practical experience once you start your professional work, is you won't be able to tell when the system and the program's given a bad output. And that's actually really important to know, because every now and then, there will be a result that doesn't make sense, and an engineer will need to be able to spot that, or a doctor in the case of the medicine ones. And not sure doing this at the post-secondary level in those cases are really going to be helping so much as hurting, by giving a way around just that knowledge development that you can only really do by working through it and, developing engineering judgment, one little piece at a time over years.
Well, the good news is the people I've met that hate AI the most are the kids. Like, wildly. Not universally.
Well, until
there's
it comes
definitely
time,
some boosters.
until it comes time for the term paper to be due.
Sure. But that speaks to a failure in process, I think, of modern education systems to keep up with good ways to actually teach. I think the big criticism I am seeing quickly as I skim around as we talk is the plan itself is thin in many areas. Like, it talks about online safety, but it hasn't really addressed how it's going to get us there, and that's all to be determined. So stay tuned, I guess. And I'll link to Michael Geist, at least, who already has a blog up on this. Yeah,
the other thing that kind of caught my eye is they talk about, scaling Canadian champions, and kind of touched on this a little bit with the building up sovereign compute and everything in there. And on one hand, that makes a fair bit of sense, particularly because there is an increasing realization that having all digital infrastructure be built on other countries' backbones, that gives other countries' governments more access than the Canadian ones necessarily have, isn't ideal in many ways. That said, the one thing I don't see here is really grappling with why aren't there Canadian champions now? So a lot of the initial research that became AI came out of Canadian universities. Like, a lot of the stuff that underpins AI is Canadian in origin, and yet none of the major AI companies are Canadian. There's a problem in the country of turning the initial academic work into startups, and then startups that become globally significant players in the industry. And I just see very little of that. They, talk about making some additional investments and stuff, and stuff that really looks at where the failure has been in the past and how to correct that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
we
invented this technology.
It's
we should be the ones making all the money off of it, and that's just not how it played out. And we should try and fix that. So the Nets technology that comes along, we can actually gain the economic benefits of in a more directed, immediate way.
We need a Connaught Labs, but for tech. A government-run, or at least funded, incubator, essentially. Because that laboratory launched during World War II, I believe, or maybe it was before even, ended up spawning so much advancements in biomedical and technology, and was a world leader in a lot of medicine research for, very unique reasons for it. But eventually the government just sold it off, and now
there's some of that, but you also do need the part of, once the initial lab work is done, turning it into a viable business enterprise, and that's as much I think we're falling short on it. And that's a more difficult thing of building up an ecosystem, deeper capital markets, and changing the Canadian culture when it comes to business investment. None of which are easy, but it'd be nice if there was a little more effort in here to turn the dial on that one.
Well, there was a ton of feedback on this. I think they had 11,000 responses or something like that to their consultation. They have also heard a lot of responses on the planned changes to environmental assessment legislation. CBC and others had reported on this, and I think we talked about it a little while back, where the government was planning a number of changes, including federal economic zones and different ways that they could accelerate projects through either the Major Projects Office or other ways, which generated a lot of pushback from First Nations, from environmental groups, and others, where the government has now decided we are going to extend our consultation on this until late July and go from there.
Yes, indeed. So this is not just the major project stuff. That's a little separate, although it definitely ties into the whole reactions on everything. Specifically, this with the discussion papers that we talked about a couple weeks ago, that they were looking at, the one regarding endangered species and the economic zones. And that's going to continue into July, which means any legislation is going to be happening in the fall session at the earliest.
It would have been really impressive for them to finish a consultation within the next, days, and then have a bill on the floor of the House within the next, 2.5 weeks before the ledge rises, or the House of Commons rises for the summer. So I think it was always going to be a bill in the fall, unless they just didn't read the consultation results, which, governments will do from time to time.
Yeah, particularly this one that's definitely has a focus and a direction they are going.
Or you just feed all your consultation into AI and then let it write your report. Isn't that what they did for the first AI report?
I could definitely see them already having a bill drafted that they then take some of the feedback and maybe tweak here or there, but wouldn't surprise me if on a desk somewhere in Ottawa there's already a first draft of this ready to go.
But it does show this government is pressurable when there is enough feedback and enough voices out there. The government will at least pause and think about something, and that kind of just is worth remembering, that even in a democracy, it's always worth expressing your opinion. Because just because they have a majority doesn't mean they will go through with things. Like, hell, Doug Ford has backed down from a number of things. I've lost count of how many things.
Yeah. I mean, Doug Ford's modus operandi is, as soon as there's like a whiff of real political opposition, we'll back down on it. It's impossible to count the number of times it's happened so much.
Yeah, I guess Danielle Smith doesn't tend to do the same, except, she'll go in one direction on the things, and it tends to be crazier. But we do still live in a democracy, so make sure your voice is heard. And if your voice is that of big US tech streaming companies, your voice is obviously getting heard, as the government has said their plan changes to streaming platform CanCon revenue contribution rates. It's not a tax. It's not a Netflix tax. We don't like those here. Those are on pause. because we don't want to make Netflix cost more to the consumer, is the government's official rule or official reasoning. And to mitigate that, they are going to throw $600 million at audio and audiovisual creators in this country, the arts, essentially. Not all arts, the like TV and radio arts.
So I don't love most subsidies just as a matter of course, but if you are going to do them, it does feel a lot better to take them out of general revenue than to do these like weird bespoke. There's there's a little money over here in this part of the industry, so we're going to try and capture that and redirect it to other points. It's just a lot more distortionary to do it that way versus just out of general revenue on it. So as far as the change goes, don't hate this one. I've also never been a fan of the specific tax model that was behind this before they changed it. So I don't know, seems fine.
This is one of those things that the US had been really mad about and had highlighted as something they wanted to see concessions on for the CUSMA negotiations. And for Canada to kind of back down on it without clearly getting anything and to try to pass it off as, oh, well, we want to make sure that they don't raise Netflix prices on consumers feels chicken shit, honestly. It feels like another place where Carney conceded to a Trump demand and got nothing.
Possibly. Most of that stuff's happening behind closed doors. We don't actually have a lot of insight into the specifics goings on, so it's a little...
No, but they did definitely say in public that they hate the online streaming act.
Oh yeah, we know that.
Didn't like the CRTC's proposed increase of rates. So...
Well, like, yeah. A lot of the US stuff's trade stuff's a little annoying to deal with domestically because honestly, a lot of the gripes are pretty fair. Now, there's definitely been some unreasonable ones that have been rolled in, particularly over the last, call it 2 years. So it's not to say every complaint has merit, but there have definitely been a lot of cases where Canada's not super great on the trade front, and it would benefit both Canadian consumers and the people we trade with if we stop some of the uncompetitive practices, and particularly things of supply management. But there's several different ones on that. But if we are going to do that, might as well get some concessions out of it
and play it up as a win and be clear about it.
Yeah,
because otherwise, politically, you look
move in the right direction. Yeah, like a lot of the stuff we should be doing anyway, and even if we don't get concessions, it still improves things for Canadians in general.
I think the CRTC's position was reasonable enough. Like, there's parts like the approach they took to Facebook and link taxes, I thought didn't make a lot of coherent sense, but this was at least defensible and within the realm of how Canadian cultural policy has been done for a long time. And the challenge with taking a lump sum from general revenue and just giving it to, audiovisual production is it's much more easy for a future government to meddle with and to reduce or to cut or to change, versus at least when there is a dedicated fund, even if it's a hacky kind of weird way to do it, it creates predictability and stability in an industry that creates our culture, that creates a sovereign country. A country is not just, an economy, but it is a people and stories and an idea. And you need an independent, unique culture to have that. And Canada has always needed to invest in our own culture because otherwise ours just becomes the US because they have so much more money than us. So finding a way to make sure that survives is important and survives different governments.
Canada needs a unique culture, but I don't think culture flows out of a government grant program. It's a much more bottom-up process. And like at most, you're nudging things, but you can't create culture by throwing around a bunch of government subsidies.
You absolutely do. Britain does it. They throw so much money at BBC and public broadcasting over there.
I mean, Britain also has a culture that is being built piece by piece over 1,000 years.
And we don't have that 1,000 years, so we have to spend more, and we don't. But I guess, they're still putting some money there. And I guess we'll see what they end up doing with the Online Streaming Act going forward, because overruling the CRTC is the government's right, but now you have a situation where the regulator looked at the legislation and tried to make a reasonable interpretation, and the government said, no, you read our law wrong. It feels like they should have to change the law at some point.
Yeah, maybe. It wouldn't be the worst thing, because this was definitely a case of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, of just taking a model that might have worked when there were a dozen radio stations and 3 TV channels, and trying to fit it into a on-demand, content-abundant internet. And that was always just an awkward fit. So, it's one of the many Trudeau-era things that would not be the worst if the government revisited with a sharper policy mind applied to it.
Can we at least get them to get the CBC to make Gem not suck? At least do that. I'll forgive anything else if you can make like a really good CBC Gem, an app that works, has good content. There is some good content on there, I'll grant them, but like it needs to be a better app and like more consistent.
Yeah, you see, this is where my skepticism of like a government-directed approach comes in, because we give CBC over $1 billion a year, and the most basic thing of coding an app doesn't even work well.
Just like with Canada Post, they need to fire all the exec and start over, because what the fuck is happening at these Crown Corps?
I mean, both of those should probably use a like top to bottom mandate review and like brought into the 21st century. But we're already at an hour, so we're probably not redesigning the various Canadian Crown corporations tonight.
And that has been Politicos. Find links to everything we talked about at politicos.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicos. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicos is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.